Latest episode of the Dynasty After Party here at Club Fantasy. I am your fill-in host today, Josh Hudson, founder of Club Fantasy, and we're diving back into our Dynasty landscape changes. 2 weeks ago, when Michael Sicoli was doing this with our good buddy Joel Wirth, who happens to be backstage right now, they were looking at the two most inconsistent positions in Dynasty, the running backs and the tight ends. This week, Joel and I are going to be talking about the two more consistent positions, the quarterback and the wide receivers. So let's get into it. Oh, that was the wrong video. Shit. Which one? Here we go. Already off to a hot start, Joel.
Great start.
Oh, welcome, everybody. I'm Josh Hudson. That is Joel Wirth, the guy who's usually on the Dynasty After Party. What's up, buddy? It's been a fun week 9.
Yeah, we're past the halfway point of the fantasy season, so things are getting down to the nitty-gritty and some kind of ugly bye weeks. Like this week's a brutal bye week, and next week's awful, right? You got the Eagles and the Dolphins and the Chiefs. So yeah, not a whole lot of teams on bye, but some really good teams on bye. So gonna be cutting some nuts here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Ryan talked about on Wednesday how ugly he thought the Germany game was going to be, and it started okay with the Chiefs jumping out 21-0, but even their 21 points was ugly. One of those 7 was a defensive touchdown. And then the Dolphins managed 14 in the second half, but it was just a really flat performance all around for the Chiefs and the Dolphins, really. So, but we're not here to recap week 9.
Standpoint.
Exactly. We are here to talk about the dynasty movement of quarterbacks and wide receivers this week. But first, let's talk a little party crashing headlines. The big news of the week, Joel, I know you love this. Josh McDaniels out with the Raiders, who, by the way, are looking like a so much better team today against a very shitty New York Giants team, but that's neither here nor there. Fantasy implications of this? I mean, are we happy with Josh McDaniels out? Is this more targets for Davante Adams? It didn't start that way this week, but Josh Jacobs, 2 touchdowns. We like that.
Yeah, I think you have to like it, right? Josh McDaniels, that offense just hasn't done anything since he's gotten there, right? And like Mark Davis has he just needs to hire a general manager to hire the coach, because he's just completely misfired on these last 2 coaching hires. John Gruden, which he luckily got out of because Gruden's a terrible person, and that came to light, and McDaniels, which was a questionable hire in the first place, after Denver and after, kind of the Indianapolis debacle where they hired him, but he didn't want the job. So that was a mess from the word go. It just doesn't sound like anybody was happy under him, right? And so I think this is kind of, the rising tide that floats all boats, because it sounds like everyone was miserable there. So Davante Adams has been spouting off, and, that's something that he typically hasn't done. Obviously, Derek Carr wasn't very happy there last year. So, you got to think this is a good thing for everyone all around. I'm not sure if Aiden O'Connell is the guy to kind of get them their targets and get the points going, but you got to think things are looking up, at least from a fantasy standpoint for the Raiders.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, O'Connell obviously was drafted by the McDaniels Ziegler regime. So whoever comes in is going to look at this roster. They're going to see Jimmy G, who sucks, and they're going to say, all right, how can we get out of this? They're going to evaluate Aiden O'Connell. Depending on how Antonio Pierce does as the interim head coach is ultimately going to determine where they end up in this draft. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later about, the potential of this incoming 2024 quarterback class, but there's a chance that they may win themselves out of the opportunity to get one of these quarterbacks and ultimately end up having to give up more assets to attempt to move up to get them, which hurts the overall aspect of the team building in general. So it's going to be a very interesting question, but to say the least, interim head coach is defensive minded. They're going to want to play defense, which 7 sacks today. It's a great start. 6 points allowed to the Giants. Another great start, and run the football. So I don't know how much more this is going to leave for a Jacoby Myers for Davante Adams. But if you have Josh Jacobs in Dynasty right now, I think you got to be pretty damn happy.
Yeah, it's still a team that's not, things always look good on the first game under a new coach. And obviously playing the Giants, things always look good in that situation. So at some point, the talent discrepancies are going to catch up with them, and the game scripts are going to be less positive. So that's when I think we'll see, how much this benefits the Adamses and the Myers.
100%. And a couple deadline moves. Not really big name moves, mind you. Josh Dobbs traded from the Cardinals to Minnesota in a attempt to replace Kirk Cousins. A hell of a debut today. He wasn't slated to start. Jaron Hall, the rookie, ended up leaving the game with a concussion. Dobbs didn't take any snaps this week and described it post-game as knowing French and taking Spanish classes, and having it translated back in French. But you know what? 2 touchdown passes, another rushing touchdown, a come-from-behind win against the Falcons. Hats off to Dobbs. And then another minor move. Cleveland Browns trading Donovan Peoples-Jones to Detroit because apparently Jameson Williams isn't quite there yet. I don't know what else to make of it, but thoughts on these moves, Joel? Because I'm actually curious why you put these in the show.
I think more than anything, is just to point out that the trade deadline, from a fantasy standpoint, was just a giant dud, right? There was just all these receivers that were kind of talked about as being potential moves, just nothing happened. Right. So it was really, obviously there were some big moves on the defensive side, but offensively, just really nothing. So Dobbs today that was when he came into the game, it looked like it was going to be a disaster. Right. It's a really misfired passes, took a safety early. That looked like it was just going to completely fall apart. And then all of a sudden the Atlanta defense just disappeared, and he was just kind of running all over. And so it made my wife happy, the Viking fan in the house. So, he looks like in that offense, he could be a viable super flex caliber starting quarterback for fantasy.
Oh, definitely a QB.
He's going to put up numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got bye weeks coming up. Hurts and Tua both on a bye next week. Week 13, 14, Mahomes as well. Yeah. So, he'll definitely get an opportunity to start, and he'll have practice time next week too. So there's definitely some upside, at least over the next couple weeks, depending how things shake out with Josh Dobbs there. Other news, though, it is believed that Cam Akers tore his Achilles today, which leaves Alexander Mattison as the lone do-it-all back there in Minnesota. I know we're not talking running backs today, but thoughts on this, because I was pretty down on Mattison even entering the year. Hasn't really done much. This offense can't run the football to save their lives, but now with no competition from Akers, who had slowly started to take some of that timeshare, you got to think that Madison's still even just a low-end RB2 to finish the season out, correct?
Almost by default, yeah, just because the running back landscape is so barren and treacherous. It's just been so many injuries, so much underperformance. So yeah, if a guy like Chuba Hubbard is a viable starter this week, just because Miles Sanders has basically been benched, then yeah, Madison has to be just by default. But yeah, too bad for Cam Akers. That's got to be the end of his career. So, and as a viable, potential starter. So too bad for him.
100%. All right, let's dive into the quarterbacks. This has been a really interesting year for quarterbacks. It's been a lot of down scoring. Even the top of the class, so to speak, the Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Jalen Hurtses, they've had some ups and downs, right? We all thought they'd be head and shoulders above everybody else. It really hasn't been that way. Mahomes, I believe, was outside the top 8 at quarterback scoring over the first 9 weeks of the season. Really didn't do much today either in Germany. Hurts has played pretty well. Obviously, Josh Allen's been Josh Allen. But let's kind of start at the top of the class, right? Those 3 kind of head and shoulders above everybody else when it came to ranking your dynasty quarterbacks. Then you get into kind of that next tier, right? You have the Lamar Jackson, you have the Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. In your opinion, anybody in that tier, right? That tier 2 behind the Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, has anybody really kind of made their case like, all right, I'm beating on the door. Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, I'm coming for you?
I don't know that anybody's going to move up into that top tier, right? Herbert's established himself as kind of the Herbert and Burrow have kind of, well, assuming that Burrow kind of gets going here and, post calf injury, and he looks to be almost fully healthy now. So I assume he'll be more like the San Francisco game Burrow than what we've saw earlier in the season. But I don't know that anybody's really done enough to kind of move into that top 3 tier. I think they've kind of established themselves as the second group. It's more about what's kind of fallen out of that group, and that kind of Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, those guys have kind of struggled is kind of harsh, but they just haven't put up kind of what was expected of them. So, now you're looking at guys like CJ Stroud with a monster day today, kind of moving into that back into that second tier.
And you know what? Speaking of the rookies, Anthony Richardson, obviously down and out this year, shoulder issue, having surgery on IR, out for the season. Bryce Young, product of the unfortunate situation, no offensive line, not much in the way of a running game, and pass catchers outside of the fountain of youth version of Adam Thielen there's nothing in that receiver core. And then of course you have CJ Stroud, who before this week, few down weeks, but 470 yards, 5 touchdown passes. I mean, it'd be hard not to give him the offensive rookie of the year if the season ended today. And you can obviously make the case for Puka Nacua, who's been shot out of a cannon the first half of the season. But just like the MVP award, a lot of times this tends to go to your quarterback. So for a guy that really was the 3rd best rookie in rookie drafts, really heading into the season, I think it's pretty safe to say Stroud has kind of jumped this field, right? Like, where are we kind of putting him in this like hierarchy of dynasty quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think he certainly belongs in that tier, behind Herbert and Burrow, right? Or in the right by Lamar, because I think people still don't trust him. So it would be nice if he would run a little bit more, but let's not look a gift horse in the mouth.
Well, at the end of the day, like, I understand it, as fantasy managers, sure, we want the quarterbacks that are mobile, but as you see with Patrick Mahomes, as you see with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, and even Tua to a certain extent, you don't need to run the football to be effective. If you can throw 35 plus touchdown passes a year, you can be a top 7, top 8 quarterback in fantasy, maybe even top 5, depending on how many people get hurt in front of you. CJ Stroud is making his case.
Yeah, and he's got a good situation, right? They've got a good offensive line when they're healthy. He's got a couple of good young receivers. So what looks like a promising head coach, D'Amico Ryans. So it's a franchise that's kind of on the way up, and he's leading that charge. So yeah, I think he's I paid some pretty heavy prices for him. We'll talk about a trade that I made earlier this week later on. But yeah, I think he's worth it. I think he's in that top tier of, fantasy, in Superflex where quarterbacks are everything. I think he's almost a gimme first round pick in startups next year.
I get that. I think you could definitely make that case. I don't think Anthony Richardson's really going to fall too far, simply because, right now he's kind of in that Trey Lance mold of limbo, right? Like, people still want to chase the upside, even though they haven't technically seen it yet. Although, leaving a game early and he scores 17 fantasy points in the first half, there's something to be said for that. Like, people really want it. It's that, that unknown, right? It's that little tease. They're going to buy into that. They're going to chase that cheese, even though somebody wants to pull that cheese away. Like, it's there. So, but let's talk a little bit about Bryce Young, because I feel like for a guy that is good, like, I don't think that he's really done anything this year to make you say, wow, the Panthers really wasted that first overall pick. Like, the situation right now is bad. So how can we as fantasy managers maybe take advantage of this? Or is this really just kind of like I got to wait and see. He's got to get some weapons around him. Maybe he's just not a quarterback that's going to make mediocre weapons better.
Yeah, I think there's that. He's kind of hit the I don't know if it's, I guess, the rookie wall in that things are different in the NFL than they were at Alabama, right? Where you had everything going for you, where everything situationally, your offensive line, your receivers, your coaching was just so much better than your opponent basically every week, except when you played Georgia. Shout out to Faith. So yeah, he's finding that it's just not that easy in the NFL, and he's going to have to make some adjustments. I expect him to make them. So he's someone that, if I can buy low on, I actively want to do that, but I don't think I don't think most people are kind of down on him. I think they're kind of afraid to give up on him too early. So his dynasty price is kind of based more on his value than his production right now. So I don't think he's someone you can really buy low on.
I get that. All right, let's talk about a starter that is supposedly coming back here in the next couple of weeks. That would be Kyler Murray. He's been kind of a hot button topic, at least in circles in my dynasty leagues, for the better part of a year or so. People tend to get a little bit scared off from the knee injury. They've seen the ever decreasing rushing yards over the past couple of years, and kind of decide that Kyler just doesn't hold the same value because he's not running as much. His weapons have deteriorated. He's basically down to Marquise Brown and youngins that really haven't done anything. And then you have an aging James Conner that, while good when he's healthy, is currently on IR. Where would you put Kyler in your quarterback hierarchy? Let's start there.
I still have him, in that back end tier 2. We saw Josh Dobbs, right? We haven't seen Kyler without Cliff Kingsbury. And I think that's the big thing we need to remember, because Kingsbury was a disaster. Kind of jury's still out on Jonathan Gannon. Yeah, obviously it's only 8 games or 9 games into his career as a head coach. But things look better offensively under Gannon than they ever did under Kingsbury, right? Just because, like, Josh Dobbs has put up serviceable fantasy numbers, and Josh Dobbs is nowhere near the quarterback that Kyler Murray is. So I think when Kyler comes back, he's going to be probably in a better overall situation than he was most of the time with Kingsbury, just because play calling's better. The line isn't. His line's been terrible basically his entire career. They haven't done him any favors there. But he does have Hollywood. Michael Wilson looks like a serviceable player. So he's got weapons. Trey McBride looks like he's kind of taken that step. And now that, Zach Ertz is out of the way, he looks like somebody who can be a viable tight end for them. So I don't know that Kyler's going to run much this year, but I think next year, once he's got, the full year plus under him of recovery time on the knee, then I think we'll get back to seeing the Kyler that we're kind of used to seeing.
All right. So I'm going to take a little cue from a game that we play a lot over on our flagship show, no pun intended. We're going to call a little Would You Rather. Okay. So as of right now, on Keep Trade Cut, Kyler Murray is ranked as QB 11. Okay. So here are a few of the guys that they have right behind him, and I want to know, would you rather Kyler Murray or Justin Fields? Kyler Murray or Bryce Young?
Kyler
Murray or Dak Prescott?
Kyler. Easy.
Kyler Murray or Brock Purdy?
Kyler
Murray or Deshaun Watson?
Kyler.
This will pull at your heartstrings. Kyler Murray or Jordan Love?
Yeah, it's easily Kyler, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Kyler Murray or Anthony Richardson?
That's tougher. I think we've seen enough from Richardson to know that he's going to be good. I just don't know if he can stay on the field, just because can he stay on the field playing the way that he does that makes him effective? That's the big question right now. I think they're close, right? I think they should be very closely valued. Gun to my head, I would say Anthony Richardson.
Okay. Kyler Murray or CJ Stroud?
Stroud.
Kyler or Tua?
I'll take Kyler.
Oh, okay. Kyler or Trevor Lawrence?
T-Law, but it's close.
All right. So, and I'm assuming Mahomes, Josh Allen, Hurts, Burrow, Herbert, Jackson. Right. You have Kyler below them. Okay.
Correct.
So right now, you basically have Kyler Murray as QB 10 in Dynasty.
About that, yeah. That sounds about right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, let's talk a little 2024 draft class. It would have been very helpful to me had you actually put all of the names of these quarterbacks in the show sheet. So I'm just going to kind of have to defer to you on this because I know a few of these guys. I love me some Michael Penix Jr. He is so much fun to watch.
Yep.
I like when I watch him play, and it's not just because he's left-handed, but he looks like Tua just with a stronger arm.
He's supercharged Tua. Yep.
Yeah, like that's kind of what I see with him. Bo Nix is another guy that I think is really interesting, but these two specifically kind of on the older side when it comes to quarterbacks, right? Joe Burrow is in a very similar situation. So I'm going to lead with those two because we know the top two in this class, right? It's Caleb Williams, it's Drake May. I don't think there's really any question there. Then I think you get really to that next tier and you're talking about those two specifically. You could probably throw a couple other guys in that. Remains to be seen with Shedeur Sanders, whether he even comes out, and also how scouts are going to view him because Colorado is really kind of taking a downturn. And I don't necessarily think it's because of Sanders, but records are still records. How are we looking at Nix and Penix just as prospects and how they can ultimately beat down the doors, so to speak, when it comes to dynasty rankings?
So I'm like you. I'm a huge Michael Penix fan. The question with him is going to be how do teams evaluate his medicals because he's torn both his ACLs. So like that's going to be there are probably going to be teams that take him off the draft board. So he's a
quarterback. He's a quarterback. He doesn't fucking need ACLs.
I agree. So he's I think he should be absolutely a first round quarterback. So like I said, it's Caleb Williams, it's Drake May, 1, 2, depending on how you look at those guys. JJ McCarthy from Michigan has probably put himself kind of firmly in that number 3 spot. And then like you said, I don't think Shedeur Sanders is coming out. So the next group is Penix, Bo Nix, maybe Jordan Travis from Florida State. He hasn't really distinguished himself. He hasn't really taken that next step. Yeah. There's some talk of him going back and going into the transfer portal. This is a pretty stacked class. So a lot of these guys, obviously Nix and Penix are kind of out of eligibility. Like Penix has played for like 6 years. So these guys, they don't have the option, but some of those guys may go back in just because, it is a fairly stacked quarterback class. Bo Nix is someone, right? He was a hugely touted prospect coming out of high school, really struggled at Auburn just because that franchise is that program is kind of a debacle. They've had just terrible coaching hires there. And then he went to Oregon and just kind of turned into the guy everyone thought they were getting when he was a freshman. So I think those guys will be kind of back end first rounders. And there's so many teams that need quarterbacks. I think they will be. I think they'll be first year starters.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the big guns. Caleb Williams, Drake May. So I'm gonna stack up again on a little would you rather because Caleb Williams is the generational prospect. We all love to throw this term around, even though it's not really generational if you're using it every fucking year. So, would you rather Caleb Williams or Patrick Mahomes?
Mahomes.
Yes, I'm starting from the top here.
That's
Caleb
too
Williams
easy.
or Josh Allen?
Josh Allen.
Caleb Williams or Jalen Hurts?
Hurts.
Williams or Joe Burrow?
Burrow.
Justin Herbert or Caleb Williams?
Herbert.
Lamar Jackson or Caleb Williams?
Lamar.
Okay. Now, those are the 6 that I felt you would firmly say you would take over Caleb Williams.
Yes.
So for me, you're talking about the start of tier 3 right now, in my personal opinion. Okay. Caleb Williams or Trevor Lawrence?
Trevor Lawrence.
Okay. Caleb Williams or Tua?
Caleb Williams.
Okay. Now we're getting interesting because you said you would take Kyler over Tua. So Caleb Williams or Kyler?
Man, that's probably the line, right? So
Well,
I'll say Kyler just because I've seen him do it.
Okay. Kyler or Stroud, or excuse me, Stroud or Caleb Williams?
Stroud because I've seen him do it.
Caleb Williams or Anthony Richardson?
That's pretty easily Caleb Williams.
Bryce Young or Caleb Williams?
Caleb Williams.
Justin Fields or Caleb Williams?
Since everyone assumes that the Bears would trade away Justin Fields if they had a chance to draft Caleb Williams, I'd say Caleb Williams.
Okay. All right. So that tells me you probably have him about quarterback. What do we get at? You said Stroud above him. You said Murray above him. Richardson above him?
No, I'd take him over Richardson.
Okay. So QB 11-ish heading in. Okay.
I think he'll walk in the door as a top 12 quarterback in Dynasty.
That's a pretty fair assessment. I think most of the top quarterbacks in any rookie class, and I do say most, not all, most, probably would enter into the league as a top 12 Dynasty quarterback simply because they are the number 1 in that respective class. Not everybody is a Kenny Pickett, all right? Let's just call a spade a spade.
The question is going to be, when we go into draft season next year, are people going to overvalue him and think that he's worth Justin Herbert? Is he worth, Lamar? Can you sell those guys? Or can you sell Caleb Williams? Or if you have a number 1 overall pick, can you sell that for Lamar plus?
Ooh, that would be spicy. Because I do have a rebuilding Superflex team. That might be something I play around with. I like that idea. Okay. All right. Same question here for Drake May. Where are we putting him in this hierarchy? I think it's fair to say that everybody that I just read off probably going to be above Drake May. So let's start with the rookie class, right? From last year or this year. CJ Stroud or Drake May?
Stroud.
Anthony Richardson or Drake May?
Richardson.
Bryce Young or Drake May?
Drake May.
Okay. Wow, you're really leaving Bryce Young in the dust here. Okay. Justin Fields or Drake May?
Justin Fields.
Okay. Jared Goff or Drake May?
Drake May.
Okay. Dak Prescott or Drake May?
Ooh, that's tough. Drake May is going to be really location dependent on how high he goes, but in a vacuum, I'll say Drake May. Just because
Purdy.
Dak's dynasty value is plummeting. Drake
It really has been, yeah. Brock Purdy or Drake May?
Drake May.
Okay. So it seems like you kind of have May in that like QB 15 range, right?
Yeah, he's clearly behind Caleb Williams for me. Like I think he's situation dependent where I think, Caleb will be, he'll be really good and a starter wherever he lands. He's situation independent.
All right, fair enough. All right, with that, let's move on to the wide receivers. Injuries have really kind of sucked the life out of Justin Jefferson, right? This is really, really hurtful. But you know what? I think it's safe to say that him and Jamar Chase are still kind of in that top of the wide receiver dynasty class. But to me, because we all know I'm a big Eagles fan, the question begs, Has A.J. Brown worked his way into this conversation? Yes or no?
I think he has to, right? I mean, the production's there every week. I mean, he's doing what we want Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase to do. He's not old, right? He's not Steph Diggs' age. He's not Tyreek Hill age, who is, the other kind of guy who's vaulted himself into the top 5 from kind of the back edge of the top 10. So, yeah, I think he has to be in that discussion.
I'm with it. I like it, but I'm biased. So that's why I asked. All right. So if it's Ja'Marr, it's Jefferson and A.J. Brown. Who are 4 and 5? Let's hear it.
I think you have to have Tyreek in that top 5, right?
Even at 29 years old.
Even at 20, he's on. I don't know if he's still on pace after he only like 60 yards today, but I mean, he's on pace for a 2,000-yard season. And like coaches have a year of film on him and they still can't stop him. He did it last year, even when Tua was hurt. So, yeah, I think Tyreek has to be in the top 5. And I will say CeeDee Lamb still belongs in the top 5. He's just so damn good. The last, he kind of struggled early, but the last kind of 3 weeks of just, we've seen that kind of elite production that we saw last year. So yeah, I think CeeDee Lamb still earns a top 5 spot.
Yeah, he had 158 yards last week, which was a career high. Set a new career high today with 192 receiving yards. All right, so you've got Lamb, you've got Hill, A.J. Brown, Jefferson, Chase, whichever order you want to put those guys in. So where does a guy like Stefon Diggs fall? Because, again, you're talking about older wide receivers, and you're talking about wide receivers that are still doing it. And he's going out there and producing year in and year out, week in and week out.
Yeah, Diggs is like, he's kind of the wide receiver version of like Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry, like those guys, the running backs who are old-ish in quotes, that nobody wants to buy into them for their dynasty value, but they just keep producing. Steph Diggs is the same thing. He just keeps producing and putting up points, and nobody wants to trade for him because he's old. So, he's kind of the classic dynasty value versus production. What do you value? So, but the production's there, so he's got to be top 10. Easily top 10.
If you were a contending team and Diggs was on a team that fell out of contention, what would you be willing to trade to get Stefon Diggs on your team? Let's just put it in terms of draft picks first, and then we can kind of talk like player evaluations. We'll call it super flex trade. We'll call it a super flex trade.
Yeah, I would say he's worth 2 back end first, but I don't think you have to pay that because
realistically, then what would you pay?
I think the proper price is like a first and 2 seconds or something like that. But that's not reasonable to have. You can't expect to have that kind of draft capital. A first and another, a lower tier player, a lower tier receiver, maybe like a Josh Downs or something like that.
Okay. I think that's realistic. I like that. I bring this up. We'll get to a question a little bit later in a trade that I made for Stefon Diggs. So we'll get some insight on that. But let's also talk about some of these kind of older wide receivers that still have some dynasty value. And there's definitely, some tiers because you had guys like Garrett Wilson that were kind of vaulting themselves up into this top 8 wide receiver dynasty range. But unfortunately, it hasn't really worked out that way this year because of the injury to Aaron Rodgers. But you have guys like Davante Adams, Cooper Kupp, who's come back, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins. Where are we kind of looking at them in terms of dynasty value versus their scoring output this year?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing with Diggs, right? And these guys they're not as consistently productive as Diggs is, but they're still, very productive, but they don't hold any, real dynasty kind of trade value. Their value is literally only in their in their production. And so they're only really attractive to contenders. So it's only, maybe half to 2/3 of your league is really interested in these players. So they have really interesting markets in that, they're hard to value, and it's they're all kind of beauties in the eye of the beholder. If you like one of these guys, you can probably get them for a price that's not kind of reflective of their actual production.
Okay. I mean, and I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I mean, I'll pull up a trade that I made in one of my rebuild dynasty teams, or dynasty league, excuse me. I ended up dealing Cooper Kupp, and I got what should be a later first in return. I want to pull up the actual trade so we can kind of talk about this, but so I traded Cooper Kupp and a 2025 third for, as of right now, it would be the 110 and Jonathan Mingo. And this is a 10-team super flex.
10-team. Now you're kind of talking about how many starters you're talking, because now if you're getting kind of shallow, then the shallower the league, the more value your
9 starting spots.
Okay, so 90. So you're talking about, so basically a 12-team start. So you're a pretty shallow league. So they're like, if I'm a contender, I definitely want Kupp in that situation.
Well, see, and that's the thing. The guy that traded for me is not contending.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in that format, you want as many studs as you can garner, right? Because it's real. Only the top of the mountain guys are starting every week for you if you're a contender. So those guys increase in value, and what's the value of the 110? Is that it's kind of a crapshoot whether that player is actually going to contribute, and how long it takes. How long will it take for that player to be a contributor? So you'd probably rather have the next 2 years of Cooper Kupp than whatever potential that pick has. So yeah, I like Kupp side in that format.
Okay. I won't take offense to that because I got the pick, but it's okay.
Is Jonathan Mingo ever going to be a starter?
I don't know.
I realize
this is kind of this is the ideology behind trades like this, right? Like, you're getting a young asset that you hope becomes something on top of a draft pick that you also hope becomes something, right?
Exactly. Yep.
I mean,
yeah, if you're a rebuilder, if you're not contending, then it's probably better to keep to have multiple assets that could turn into a Cooper Kupp. So I get it from both sides.
I could always go through with that 110. I could flip it if I hit on some of these other picks. Maybe I make another move that helps this team get to a competitive window, because my quarterbacks in this league are Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, and Jared Goff. So I have the pieces in place at quarterback in a super flex league. If I make the right moves, whether it's with my 4 first-round picks and multiple picks throughout the rest of the draft, I can make a lot of maneuvering, so to speak, to reshape this team. But that again just kind of goes to, it makes sense to get the draft capital now, because that draft capital is only going to go up the closer we get to the rookie draft.
Yeah, and the value there is getting those points off your team, assuming it's like a potential points or something for the draft pick, and then using that 110 or whatever as kind of leverage to move up into to get a stud, to get a Caleb Williams, to get a Marvin Harrison, who we'll talk about, because those are the guys you want to put on those are the assets that you really care about in a 10-team start 9.
100%. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about the 2023 rookies. We know Puka Nacua, shot out of a cannon. Jordan Addison's come on in the wake of Justin Jefferson's injury. JSN, the leading Seahawks receiver today, had a couple really good weeks. Still a little unknown because DK and Tyler Lockett really kind of leading the charge there in Seattle. Zay Flowers has been fantastic, even though his ADOT is about as large as Kyler Murray. and Josh Downs and Rashee Rice have really started to come on. Rice kind of taking ownership of that wide receiver one role, and I use quotations because we all know Travis Kelce is that. And of course, Josh Downs, who came into this game questionable, ended up leaving with the same injury, but has come on really well with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. So let's first talk Puka, because I think his situation kind of mirrors that of some of these fading and aging wide receivers that we previously discussed. His value kind of lies in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yeah, very much. I mean, if you kind of look at the big picture, right, he was maybe a third round pick, maybe undrafted, to kind of come up out of nowhere and just kind of blow up the record book, really, right? Just on his target share and the amount of targets he got. So there was the debate early in the seasons, like, should you cash out on that value now, before Cooper Kupp gets there and things change, or, do you want to kind of ride that asset, that free asset? And then, Cooper Kupp's come back and the targets have still been there. So, like there were a couple leagues where I had the opportunity to buy him for a first, and I turned it down early in the season because, Cooper Kupp's going to, like you said, Cooper Kupp's going to come back and then he's going to grab that target share. And then, but, Cooper Kupp's come back and he's gotten his target. So it's really been just a two-man target tree, and in an offense that can funnel a lot of targets to those two top guys. So yeah, he was definitely worth more than whatever you would have had to give up early to get him early in the season.
Okay. Where does Addison fit as a wide receiver 2 in potentially a pretty high octane offense if they end up bringing back Kirk Cousins next year? If they don't, how does that change his value potentially?
If they don't, I mean, the value change is always going to be kind of speculative onto, is it a rookie quarterback? Is it someone else? Did they make a trade for a quarterback? Who is the quarterback? If it's, a rookie and you're starting over, then, you've got guys ahead of him in the pecking order, like Jefferson, Hawkinson, he may become kind of a third wheel, and, until that rookie gets up to speed. So you could be looking at a lull there. But I think he's shown enough that he's going to be, he's going to hold kind of top 10 dynasty receiver value, kind of like, like Drake London's probably the worst case for him, right? He's a guy who's going to earn targets. Worst case is he just becomes dependent on his offense. Best case is that he's a really good player, fringe top 5 dynasty asset.
Do you think we see Zay Flowers ADOT creep above 4?
Does his ADOT creep above his height? Yeah, I mean, he's been like a DFS darling, just like every week, and just doesn't produce, right? He gets the targets, but they're just really low value targets. So yeah, he's a really interesting case because, the people like me who are like targets, but he's getting targets and doing really nothing with them in an offense that, may not support what we want him to be, right? He's probably better than Rashad Bateman, but Bateman was a really highly touted prospect coming out of Minnesota and just hasn't, obviously injuries have hampered him, but he's done nothing, just absolutely nothing. So, can that offense sustain kind of the value that we want Flowers to be when you have someone like Mark Andrews, who's going to be, just the alpha target hog there?
Yeah. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about Rashee Rice because, as I mentioned, we've kind of seen the progression from early in the season where he was being used really in the red zone because he is a bigger wide receiver, at least comparative to the rest of the wide receivers on the Kansas City Chiefs. But now, when you factor in, routes run, target share, all of those things that, make a wide receiver good, you could make the case that maybe he's third or fourth in this like wide receiver, like rookie wide receiver pecking order. Where do you kind of see him in the greater dynasty spectrum in terms of wide receivers right now?
The issue with Bryce is, does he become like he's not Tyreek Hill, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but does he develop that connection with Patrick Mahomes, that kind of, preternatural, because Patrick Mahomes is probably the greatest off script, off platform quarterback in the history of the league. Can you be someone like Tyreek Hill, like Travis Kelce, who knows what Mahomes is going to do and knows where he's going to want you to be? If you can develop that, then he can be an elite receiver. If not, then his ceiling is just good, because there's so many targets that, there's so many players that get targets in that offense. So you have to be really good to kind of rise above. You have to be kind of Tyreek level, if not skilled, then Tyreek level connection with Mahomes to kind of rise above kind of the swamp and to be an elite target earner in that offense.
Makes sense. All right, let's go. Let's talk a little of the 2024 draft class, because let's be honest, this is Marvin Harrison Jr. and his offspring. I don't know. Like, he's daddy, right? Like, he is the king of this class, and there's really not much else behind him in terms of that. So, give me your thoughts on Harrison Jr. with everybody else, right? We played a little keep trade cut with Caleb Williams. Talk a little bit about Marvin Harrison, and then we're going to start reading off some players, and I kind of want to get your idea for sort of where you think that he fits in the dynasty rankings at wide receiver at this point.
So going into the season, I think the hot take was that he would walk into the league as the dynasty wide receiver 3. At this point, I think you can say it's almost hot take. It's a reasonable hot take that he can walk in as the dynasty wide receiver 1, just because he is so skilled. I mean, he's the prototype, right? He's everything you want. He's incredibly smart. He's incredibly physical. He's got every attribute you could want, and he's going to be so much younger than, it's not like Jefferson and Chase are old, but he's going to be 3-4 years younger than those guys are. And he's done nothing this year to kind of, like JSN 2 years ago was kind of the dynasty wide receiver, or the class wide receiver 1, and then basically didn't play, and it really kind of dinged his value. Marvin Harrison's had a great year. Not as good as he was with Stroud, but just because Kyle McCord's been really terrible, but he's rising above that, right? He's still producing. He's still scoring, even though that offense has really taken a downturn since Stroud left. So I think it's a legitimate question to say, is he going to be more valuable? Is he going to be more valued than Jefferson and Chase? Or is he going to be valued at that same level?
Okay. So Jefferson, Chase, Marvin Harrison Jr., or A.J. Brown?
I think I have to say A.J. Brown, just because of what he's doing and kind of the physical specimen that he is. I think if you have the 102, you can probably easily get A.J. Brown with it.
Okay. Marvin Harrison or Tyreek Hill?
Harrison.
Okay. So right there, you have him as your wide receiver 5. Or 4.
Probably 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to throw another name out that we did not mention initially when we were talking top 5 wide receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr. or Amon-Ra St. Brown?
Harrison.
Okay. Marvin Harrison or CeeDee Lamb?
Harrison.
Marvin Harrison or Garrett Wilson?
Harrison.
Marvin Harrison or Jalen Waddle?
Harrison. Yeah, that's easy.
Okay. Harrison or Stefon Diggs?
Harrison.
All right. So basically you have him as your wide receiver 5 in Dynasty. 4.
Yeah, probably higher.
So, all right. So you have.
I would have Harrison him over Tyreek, yes.
Okay.
I think he's going to easily have.
CeeDee Lamb.
He's going to have more dynasty value than Tyreek will have easily.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair. I mean, Hill's going to be 30 at the start of next season. Yeah. So, okay. All right.
I think he will
give
be
me some other wide receivers.
Though.
What's up?
He will be situation independent, though, which is something we can't say for like the Garrett Wilsons or Drake Londons or Chris Olaves that came out of last year's class.
All right. Well, you speak of situation independent. I want to kind of look at the current rankings and where they sit right now. If Marvin Harrison Jr. landed on the Arizona Cardinals, how high or low would you take him in your dynasty rankings? Presumably that he ends up being paired with Kyler Murray, because right now, as record stands, Arizona has the number 1 overall pick.
I wouldn't change my ranking.
Okay. Marvin Harrison on the Chicago Bears.
Wouldn't change my ranking.
Okay. Marvin Harrison on the New England Patriots.
Would not change my ranking.
You sure? Because that Patriots offense is pretty bad.
Yeah, I'm going to assume they have a different quarterback. Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy who can elevate an offense to become really good. Okay. Like Jamar Chase did in Cincinnati, like Justin Jefferson did in Minnesota.
All right. The only other one I'm going to throw out, because it's pretty clear that they need as many weapons as you can get, but obviously have a lot more holes. Marvin Harrison on the New York Giants.
Doesn't change my ranking.
Even without a line to keep Daniel Jones upright. Or any quarterback upright, for that matter, because presumably Daniel Jones just tore his ACL today.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that. Like I said, my cable was out this afternoon, so I didn't hear much of the afternoon game. So, yeah, I mean, I would expect that. I think he is I think he is truly situation independent. So, the team that he's on doesn't change my ranking.
All right, fair enough. That said, let's end on this note before we get into the trades. Give me your next favorite wide receiver from this 2024 class.
I am a huge Rome Odunze fan. I think he's going to be the Washington. He's Michael Penix's number 1 target. Gotcha. He's big, he's fast, great ball skills. So I think coming into the year, Emeka Egbuka was the kind of wide receiver 2. He hasn't had a great year. He's kind of fallen out. He had some injuries, and like I say, Kyle McCord has been terrible. The Ohio State offense has kind of fallen down. There's been some guys who stepped up.
They're the number 1 team in college football.
Yeah, exactly. Like Keon Coleman from Florida State's really stepped up. Malik Neighbors from LSU's kind of come on. I'm still a huge Rome Odunze fan. That offense has been electric. They've got other weapons like Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan, but I like Odunze a lot. I think the NFL is going to be very high on him. So I think he's going to go higher than like the draft community thinks he's going to go.
All right, fair enough. All right, let's get into the Do Better trades of the week. I love the name of this. I need a shower trade of the week. 12-team Superflex, tight end premium, start 10. Kirk Cousins and a 2024 second for Derek Carr and a 2024 fourth.
Yeah, so
not even gonna lie.
This is a contending team that lost Kirk Cousins and doesn't have a lot of quarterback depth after him. So, man, I hate Derek Carr. I hate the situation because of the Taysom Hill nonsense. But you got to do what you got to do, right? You got to replace that production somehow. You got to try. You can't just say, "Oh, I lost my quarterback. I'm not going to try and contend." He's put up some, the last kind of 3 weeks, kind of after presumably the shoulder issue is healed. He's been functional. He's putting up 18, 19 points in the last few weeks. So that's
points.
A representative substitute. Yeah, exactly. It's points that can,
because you're not getting any from Kirk Cousins.
Kind of replicate Kirk Cousins. Yeah. So I do have Josh Dobbs in that league. So that's kind of the fallback option. But Yeah, and at the price, basically, I don't expect anything from Cousins. Not that I don't think he will be productive next year, but I don't have any reason to expect him to be. Coming off the injury, don't know where he's going to go as a free agent. So there's a lot of questions. So I can't treat it like if Patrick Mahomes got hurt and just assume that he's going to be great next year anyway. So at the cost of a second and, giving up on whatever Cousins produces next year, it's what you got to do if you want to stay competitive.
Correct. All right. Next one, a rebuilding team. 12-team Superflex start 9, trading Breece Hall and Rachaad White to go and get CJ Stroud, 2024 second and a 2024 third. I mean, first off, you're getting a quarterback and it's Superflex. That's a win already, right? Like, if you're rebuilding, what the fuck do you need running backs for?
Yeah. So at the time, when I was offered this trade, I was like, well, he's probably thinking like I saw this in my inbox and we just went smash. So this was an easy accept. But I'm thinking, okay, what am I missing? Okay. He's looking at the last 3 weeks and Stroud really hasn't been that productive. Obviously if this trade had been done, obviously it wouldn't happen after today, right? This trade doesn't happen after the day that Stroud had today. So Breece Hall is, he's arguably the Dynasty RB1. Most people would have Bijan, but there's some people
with the way that the Falcons are using Bijan right now.
So arguably the Dynasty RB1. Rachaad White's a productive running back. But yeah,
a little fast and loose on the word productive, but it was today.
In a PPR, he can be
fair.
He's not a great running back. He's a productive running back. But yeah, for a rebuilder, this is, to get a potentially elite quarterback at the cost of 2 running backs, kind of a no-brainer. But yeah, like I said, after the day that Stroud kind of pissed me off because I'm probably going to win my matchup, and this is a team I'm getting these points off my team. I'm trying to get. I think I'm locked into a top 2 pick, but that might make me. This is going to make me a little bit nervous now.
That's hilarious.
And I do have Anthony Richardson on that team on my IR, so not going forward, I'll have the Stroud Richardson combo. So
not bad.
Potentially looking pretty good, and a lot of draft capital this year. So off to a good start on the rebuild.
I would like to nominate this next trade as part 2 of the I Need a Shower trade of the week. 12-team Superflex tight end premium start 10. Derrick Henry for Aaron Jones and Roschon Johnson.
I got offered this and I just looked at it and went, this is just free Roschon Johnson, right? And I Henry and Jones are kind of, flip a coin. Which one do you like better? I don't love Roschon Johnson by any means, but free is free, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, I'd still argue that Henry's definitely separated himself from Aaron Jones, who, he scored today, but the Packers have no fucking idea what the hell they're doing with Aaron Jones and haven't figured that out over 7 years.
He looked a lot better today, and he was much more involved today, so I think he's finally.
God, I hope so. Because I have a lot of teams that are relying on Aaron Jones, and most of them are like 2-6 right now. So 12-team Superflex start 10. Nick Chubb, pour one out. Jahan Dotson and Devonta Smith for Royce Freeman, Tony Pollard, and Christian Watson. I don't even know what to make of this trade. Like, straight up, no idea.
So this was a trade I made because I was kind of desperate for running back help. I made this trade actually 2 weeks ago. So before the Jahan Dotson breakout, whatever we're calling that. So at the time, Chubb was not going to give me anything this year. Dotson had done absolutely nothing. So, the way I was looking at it was I gave up Devonta Smith for Tony Pollard and Christian Watson. Now, 2 weeks later, Tony Pollard still hasn't done a goddamn thing. Christian Watson hasn't done anything either. He just doesn't look like he's either not over the injury or he's not confident that he's over the injury, because he just doesn't look like the same player. So this is a trade I would very much like to have back, just, 10 days after I made it. But just kind of just injury ravaged at running back and had to do something. Again, this is a contending team that was basically 2 running backs short, and then made the subsequent trade today to get another one. Just because I'm worried that Tony Pollard's
second round pick for Jerome Ford. That's got to stink.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
Don't love that either, but no, I think that Jerome Ford is going to kind of consolidate that backfield a little bit once he gets healthy, but maybe not. Maybe that backfield maybe that offense just isn't that good. So
that's fair. All right.
These are the trades that you got to make if you're trying to contend. I don't like it. They're kind of hold your nose, but you got to do what you got to do.
This is fair. All right. The next one I think is a really interesting one, especially because we were talking about the hierarchy of wide receivers. 12 team Superflex tight end premium start 10. Justin Jefferson and a 2024 second for Jamar Chase and a 2024 third. This right here tells me that Jamar Chase is somebody's wide receiver 1 in Dynasty.
Well, this was actually made a couple weeks ago when Jefferson still had like 3 weeks to go on his IR stint. So it was.
He may still have 3 weeks to go on his IR stint.
That's entirely possible. Yeah. So this is a contender that I gave away Jefferson to get Chase, to get the active player at the cost of swapping a second and a third. I'm pretty easily doing that.
Fair enough. All right. These next couple are ones that I made, and I'm just throwing them in here because we need trades to talk about. So 12 team Superflex tight end premium start 10. DeAndre Hopkins, Romeo Dobbs, a 2025 third round pick for Rondale Moore, Alec Pierce, 2 2024 picks, a second and a third. Obviously, one is a contending team, one is not.
Is it blasphemous to say the 2024 second is the most valuable pick?
This trade was made just after DeAndre Hopkins' big 4-catch, 3 touchdown week.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I mean, D-Hop's going to have more games. He's going to have better games than he had Thursday night. So yeah, I get this trade. You're not really giving up anything to get D-Hop. If that's a contender's 24 second, then this is easily the D-Hop side.
Yeah. The reason that I made this deal to get D-Hop, A, I'm a contending team. B, my wide receivers are so bad in this league. Like, my top 2 are Garrett Wilson, Christian Kirk, and then I also have Deontay Johnson and Josh Palmer, who just landed on IR. Like, that was it. That's all the depth I had at wide receiver. And I didn't have any firsts because I traded them to go get Jalen Hurts and Travis Kelce.
That's good use of your first.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, I don't have the highest of hopes for DeAndre Hopkins. I don't have the highest of hopes for Romeo Dobbs, but they're at least seeing targets in bad offenses.
Yep.
And they can be viable flexes. And if all it cost me was a second and a swap of thirds, I will take that.
Yep.
And this next one, as I mentioned, we would circle back to Stefon Diggs. Also a contending team. It's a 10-team Superflex tight end premium start 10. Drake London and Tank Dell for Stefon Diggs. This was before the big Tank Dell blow up, obviously.
Yeah, see, this is hard for me because I'm a huge Drake London fan, and just watching him in Atlanta under Arthur Smith is just like a knife through my heart every Sunday.
Facts.
So, and yeah, you cannot count on his production right now in that offense. And yeah, like you said, before today, Tank Dell was kind of doing the same thing that Stroud was. He kind of gone 3 weeks without any real production. So yeah, this is, as much as I want to say Drake London because I love him, this is the Diggs side.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking. I mean, this is a contending team. I've got Mahomes. I've got Kelce. I have Breece Hall at running back. I can makeshift plenty of RB2s. My wide receivers, Jalen Waddle, Drake London, Puka Nacua. I have some other depth pieces. So
you can afford to give up the 2 players.
Exactly. I can afford to give up the 2 players. I just didn't feel like I had a legitimate wide receiver 1 that I could pair with the likes of Mahomes, Kelce to really formulate that lineup. Now, I do have an offer out with my 2025 first to crossing fingers, get CeeDee Lamb from a non-contending team. But I think after today, that probably went out the window.
That's going to be tough for a single first.
Well, I mean, I offered some players too. Like, come on, man. All right. Speaking of, come on, man. Come on, people. Do better trade offer of the week. 12-team Superflex, tight end premium. Start 8 on a non-contending team. Anthony Richardson, Roschon Johnson, and Michael Pittman. For Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, Travis Kelce, and a 2024 early first.
Yeah, so context here. I am the non-contender, and the team, I think they were the third place team, put Anthony Richardson on the trade block. Okay. That team is stacked, except they have nothing at tight end. I have Kelce. My team's going nowhere. I think I'm third from the bottom. So this is one of the rare situations where I was willing to move Travis Kelce if I could get a starting quarterback, a top 10 starting quarterback. So my initial offer was I would give him Kelce and Mike Evans and Zach Moss for Anthony Richardson, Brandon Ayuk, and Nick Chubb. Now, value-wise, that's an aggressive ask. I get that. But if you're a contending team, Chubb's doing nothing for you. Richardson's obviously doing nothing for you. You're getting Kelce, which fills a hole for you with the best player at that position, and you're flopping Brandon Ayuk for Mike Evans. Why would you not take that deal? If that deal puts you over the top, and this is kind of my point here, if you can win, go win. Why are you worried about next year? Why are you worried about the dynasty value of your team? Go win.
And I think that's a big issue in the dynasty community as a whole. We fall in love with these younger players and we consistently push towards next year. And people forget that the whole point of playing fantasy football, regardless of the format, whether it's dynasty, redraft, best ball, DFS, etc., it's to fucking win. Make moves that are going to help you win. So worry about the consequences later.
So he declined my offer, and then he came back with this piece of trash, which there's looking a gift horse in the mouth, and then there's punching that gift horse in the mouth. And that's what this said. There's no way I'm making that deal. I'm not giving up a first and Kelce.
No, I mean, really, Jonathan Taylor. That's insane. What this looks like to me, and I see this all the time. Like anytime people play in Superflex leagues, sometimes they overvalue quarterbacks, right? Like I had somebody, this was before last year played out, and my quarterbacks were dreadful, and I offered, I think it was like a mid first, not even a mid first, it might have been a late first for Mac Jones, because I needed something. This guy came back with like 2 firsts and a top flight player because, hey, it's Superflex. I know how valuable quarterbacks are.
Oh, that's
rich. Cool, but bad quarterbacks really aren't worth that much.
Right. Exactly.
Like, and again, I get it. Anthony Richardson being hurt, arguably the 101 in Superflex last year, got off to a pretty decent start this year. I mean, even in points per game, I think he's a top 7 quarterback on this season. Like, so I get that. Kelce being older, Jonathan Taylor being a running back, sure. But all of that and an early first for Anthony Richardson ain't at home.
No, not going to happen.
Not it. All right,
that's subsequently come back with some lesser offers, but still nothing that's even remotely close.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Joel, thank you very much, buddy. Tell everybody where they can find you and everything you're working on, and we'll give a shout out to Mr. Michael Sicoli himself, who, excuse me, unfortunately could not be here tonight, but you can follow him on the socials at Michael__Sicoli. Joel, yourself?
I'm Joel at the Joel Wirth on the Twitter X machine. The second volume of the Dynasty playlist will be coming out this week, so look for that. And,
see, I was going to ask you about that off air, but thank you for that notification.
It's coming. It's coming.
All right, and you can follow myself on Twitter, X, whatever the fuck you want to call it, at the1Hudsonian, and everything that I do is right here on the Club Fantasy, YouTube, Twitch, and other channels that we stream to. So Be sure to follow Club Fantasy across the socials at Club Fantasy FFL. The URL, clubfantasyffl.com. Make sure you're also following Women of Fantasy Football, our sister site, at women_of_FF on Twitter and Instagram. Excuse me. And always remember, Dynasty is like a disco ball. It keeps on spinning year round. So I'm going to switch this up. Join the after party every other Sunday at 7:30 right here at Club Fantasy. For Joel, for Michael, who's not here, for myself. We will see everybody in 2 weeks. Enjoy week 10.